Good evening and welcome to the AHDB webinar on time management. Just a few housekeeping while we wait for a few more people to join us. All of the attendees are on mute. If you have any questions, please do feel free to ask throughout the presentation while we're talking. The questions will come up written on our screen and we'll be able to respond to those. And also, if you have any technical problems listening to this, then please do also type in those questions. We've got Luke on hand to help with any technical issues you may encounter. We're hoping that this will run through till about 8 o'clock. If we don't keep this on time, Alistair, then we shouldn't be talking about this topic probably.
Yeah, indeed.
And the recording will be available for anybody that wants to catch up on any of this or ends up missing a little bit of it. So it will be available on YouTube and on the AHDB website as well. So we'll start with some introductions, and time management is a topic that we hear lots of farmers and growers struggling with. And I think all of us know what it feels like to get to the end of a day and then realise actually we've got to go back to the office and start our day job and what we really meant to do that day. We all work in a flexible and a dynamic environment, and let's face it, that variety is probably what got us started in this industry in the first place and what keeps us motivated. But I think we have to ask ourselves, how often is that variety and unpredictable making us inefficient? And how much time could we save and be more effective in our business if we were saving that time? So, and most importantly, what would we do with that time? Would we reinvest it back in the business or perhaps get home at a normal time once in a while? So these are the areas that we're going to cover this afternoon, this evening. I'm Tess, the Senior Skills Manager at AHDB. I'm responsible for the skills programme across all 6 sectors in AHDB, and we largely focus on the business and the people management side of things. I'm joined by Alistair, Gibb and Will Oliver. So Alistair, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, good evening everyone. I work for Cedar Associates as a management trainer and facilitator, and I've been involved with AHDB, among others, delivering leadership management development programs. One in particular is a professional management development scheme that we've been running for a number of years. And prior to that, I spent my early career as a farm manager for 12 years before moving into this role.
And Will?
Good evening everybody. I'm a 4th generation arable farmer from the Leicestershire, Warwickshire border near Market Bosworth. We specialise in combinable crops, and we grow some potatoes, and I'll soon be entering the poultry industry.
That's brilliant. Thank you both for taking the time out to help us here. Will and Alistair have been working with myself on looking at time management, and we've got some real practical tips that we want to share with you this evening. But first of all, we're going to talk about managing time and actually how that's a bit more related to managing our energies and how these differ and impact on our daily life. Alistair?
Yeah, I think there's so much been said and written about time management, and yet people still struggle with it. And I think an interesting way to turn things on its head is to actually look at it in the context of how we use our energy. And I'm sure you appreciate when you feel drained of energy in different forms, you immediately become less effective. So your ability to manage your energy is actually vital if you're going to make the most of your time and get the best out of your days. One way to look at it, and the first thing that really underpins all our energy, is obviously our physical energy and how much energy we have to do things. So a lot of that links to how you manage your health, how much rest you have versus how much you actually do, how you pace yourself, and how you recharge. And if you don't take time to do those things and manage that effectively, you know yourself, if you have a short night or you're overworked, you start pacing yourself more and your productivity starts to potentially drop. The second way to look at how your energy has an impact on your time use is your emotional energy. And this is really about managing how we feel. And I think it's interesting, just last week was Mental Health Awareness Week. So more and more is coming out about the impact of people's mental health on what they can do. And really it's about how do you manage that? How happy are you in what you do? Where do you gain satisfaction from? And I'm sure you'll appreciate, if you're feeling down or your emotions have taken a knock, again, it's very difficult to kind of focus and channel your energy productively because that starts to weigh you down. The third energy to think about and consider is your mental energy. And this is really about how well can we allocate some time to give our full focus to a particular task. And this is a big challenge in today's age of technology, is most people are continually distracted by their technology, social media, other things that are going on. And to actually sort of set aside time and take those distractions away and give you full focus to something is becoming an increasing challenge. But we're going to lose efficiency and effectiveness if we don't, make time and set aside time or protect time to do that. And lastly, there is the fourth type of energy, is what's called spiritual energy. Now, I'm not talking about this in a religious sense in any way, shape or form, whilst I appreciate some people, take value from that. But this is really about why do you do what you do and what's your clear focus and purpose on where you're heading. And this very much links into your ability to plan much more long term, think clearly about where you want to go and what you want, and then it's how that helps you prioritize things in the shorter term. So those are the kind of four types of energy, and our ability to manage all four definitely has an impact on our ability to use our time effectively and efficiently. And this has come from a guy who's written a book called Tony Schwartz, who says, manage your energy, not your time, and he's written a book called On Form. And I think it's just a really useful way to kind of look at this challenge of managing your time.
I know from working with you, Alistair, I've certainly spent a little bit of time looking at the way that I manage my energy, and it has been beneficial. It's great for looking at yourself, but do you think it's something, if you're managing people, responsible for other people, do you think it's something that applies in that context as well?
Absolutely. I mean, when you start breaking this down, looking at your staff, I mean, their physical energy, are they getting adequate time off? Those that are working in seasonal businesses, it can be a real stretch, as the days wear on, depending on what kind of season you've had. And the ability to create a bit of space or time for people to recharge is tough. But where do you capitalize on that when you can? I think the emotional energy, if you consider your responsibility to look after people's health and safety, welfare is a key part of that that you're also responsible for. And that links to this kind of emotional energy management. Check in with people. How are they? If they're looking down or they seem to be dragging along a bit, that's maybe where we need to ask a question or two and just check in with them and find out how they're doing or what's preoccupying them. Maybe if you look at the spiritual energy side, that might relate to, if you have some kind of review with your staff, to check in with them, how they're doing, planning and reviewing what they've done and what they're going to go forward with. That gives you the opportunity to look at what are they focusing on, what's important for them. So most definitely there's lots of opportunities to link this, not just to yourself, but to your team and your staff.
So, Will, I know you had some training on this a couple of months ago. What really resonated with you when you were having this concept explained?
Well, the way it relates to me is like on the family farm, I'm carrying out my own agronomy. So that gives me a chance just to get outside the office, walk around, clear my head, have a bit of time away from everything, but I'm still being productive at the same time. So that involves all these energy sectors that Alistair talked about, and I find it really hugely beneficial. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, so we're talking about time management, but really, do any of us understand how we're really using our time? I think there's a lot of unconscious things going on with us. So do you want to run through that with us, Alistair?
Yes, I think moving on from the background of how we use our energy, I think another useful way to look at things is where our workload comes from. So on that left-hand box that you'll see on your screen, it looks at workload, and it comes from three main sources. The first source is what people want from you, and every day you'll have a plan potentially, but inevitably people turn up and start putting demands on you of things that they want, or the unplanned or the unexpected comes along, and it's how do we manage that. And typically, as you see at the top of the box there, that could come from your boss, your manager, customers, suppliers, colleagues, and as I'm sure you can start to identify other sources that have a pull on your time. The second box there underneath requests is planned work. And really what I mean by that is these are the kind of projects that often sit on the back burner that you think, when I've got time, if I could get that done, that's going to make my work easier, or it's going to advance my business, or it's going to help me sort out some projects that I know are going to have an impact on the bottom line. And it's about creating some time for that. And this often gets squeezed by the top box, the stuff that inflows and adds to your workload. And of course, at the bottom, there is the routine type work, which you don't plan for because it happens as a matter of routine. And there's a time set to ensure that those types of jobs are done. And whether that might be milking or harvest or watering plants, whatever it is, that has to be done. And it's about how do we kind of create more time and space for ourselves then with this workload. So at the top, it might be about how do we control that inflow of requests, and where can we filter that so that either we can reduce the impact that that has on us. A common way that many of you will do it is you will reprioritize those requests that come in against the work that you're trying to get done. And in some cases, that reprioritization may push some of the work that you're trying to do further down your list. On the bottom side, there will be some of the routine work. And how often do you step back and challenge? Why are we doing it this way? Is that the way because of the way it's always been done? And often there's a real opportunity here, and it can be part of your planned work, is setting aside time to say, let's rewrite this. If we were to tear this whole thing up and replan this job from scratch, how would we do it differently? And often there's some real time savings to be achieved here. Sometimes that can come through automating a task. In other ways, by involving some of your people in the process, they may have some ideas or ways to kind of challenge what you're doing. And if you can find ways to save time, cost, and effort here, that's a real winner. And it creates more space to work on these projects that will advance your business, the way that work's done, and the way that people work, and add to your bottom line as well. As you can see, that then translates into the middle box there, and it's about how we use our time. So how much of our time is used effectively, and that's ultimately time that translates into your results. And by results, what I'm talking about here is being clear about what are your goals, how do you measure your success, and being clear about what that might be. So for some of you, there will be a financial goal that you're trying to meet. That may be supported by physical goals of physical performance, whether that's about yields in livestock, plants, crops. So these will be some of the measurable outcomes of your efforts ultimately. The other side of it is where can time get wasted? And that can happen because we may spend more time on the jobs we like doing, but these could be potentially lower priority work. And although it may motivate you, it may be that you're spinning your wheels and you're not actually sort of delivering these towards these goals, when you could be doing higher priority work, and sometimes those are jobs that you don't potentially like doing, but you might put them off. And that's where these habits come in. If we procrastinate and put stuff off, there's a real risk. And I know for me, it used to be the bane of my life was budgeting before computers came to the fore, having to do it all by hand, and it was a real pain. But it was a really critical part of my job, and it was something that I had a real tendency to put off if I could avoid it. So these are ways to look at your workload, how that converts into our use of time or otherwise, and then into our key results. So
you mentioned challenging there on our routine work and reprioritising, and I think a lot of our listeners will actually now be taking part in sort of peer-to-peer learning. So lots of people are active on monitor farms, strategic farms, and really having that group of other farmers come in and challenge what you're doing. And we've seen that on the training courses that we've worked together on, people really looking at things with a different set of eyes. And I think that challenge is great, but I think one of the things people struggle with is then what? How do you say no to those tasks that you've done all the time? Have you got any ideas and tips for that?
Yeah, I think that is a challenge, and I think it then links into how you start to prioritise the work that you've planned. I think having a plan in the first place is critical, because that gives you a clear steer on what you need to do in the day and the week ahead or the month ahead, and it allows you to challenge what other people want from you much more easily, because it helps you stand more steadfast if you need to challenge what somebody else wants versus what you're trying to do. By the way that you prioritise that. And in some cases, yes, you are going to say yes to other people, because you might need to scratch their back so they scratch yours, and that's where the give and take is. There may be other times when you have to sort of really question, does this really need to be done now, or when does it really need to be delivered, or when can this be done? So it's always a good question to ask. And in some cases, you may be able to sort of say no to somebody and say, no, I can't do this today, but I will do this tomorrow for you, or will do this later. So having that plan helps you be a lot tougher in terms of being assertive with people when you need to determine what you can or can't take on. And the real danger is, if you're not careful, you can become the yes person, and you're doing everybody else's bidding, let alone yours.
Okay, great.
Okay, so maybe linking to, in that second box, you'll see another little item there called the Pareto Principle. Some of you may be aware of this. Sometimes it's talked about as the kind of 80-20 rule. And really, where this kind of came from is Pareto was an Italian economist, and he looked at the distribution of wealth in his country and basically identified that 80% of the wealth is distributed among 20% of the population. And I think, I'm sure if you look around, you'll probably agree that that still is true today as when he identified this. Now, in the context of managing your time, the way this plays out is often 20% of your effort may translate into 80% of your results. And this is really about, when you think about planning your day, is identifying, well, where's the quick wins? You know, if I get this job knocked out and that's going to sort of contribute directly or immediately to some of the things that I'm trying to achieve or contribute to my goals, then that's a good use of my time. Another way to think about the Pareto Principle in relation to time management is, you know, where can I work smarter rather than harder? And that's where less effort, more results kind of pays off. And another way that you might appreciate this is when you've got a day off or you're going on holiday, you're probably never more clear-cut about what are the most important things that I need to get done today and what can go hang. And that's another way of looking at how you kind of prioritise with Pareto.
So, I mean, principles are all well and good when they're on paper and they all sound great, don't they? But Will, have you got any real examples where this has actually worked for you on the farm?
Yeah, I found that planning my day now is essential, and I'll do that the night before or before the day starts in the morning, because then when we get to the yard, we're hitting the ground running and everyone knows what we're doing, and that will rarely change. I find doing important jobs first, prioritising the day, because things do go against the plan, and if they take longer, at least focusing on the important roles. And then for myself, finding time to be in the office in the day, not leave it till I get home, leaving it till the last minute when I'm tired. And then that's made me spend more time on benchmarking and analysing what we're doing, and that's actually made me probably cut costs more than if I was just doing some simpler jobs in the yard. Yeah, so office jobs are more important than what we probably let on. So I'm finding myself allowing time to do that.
Brilliant, thank you.
Good. Okay, so just to sum up here a little bit further, I think we've all been there. You know, you get to the end of the day sometimes and you look back and you think, what have I achieved? And I think this puts into context, if we're not careful, we can become the busy fool and if we haven't prioritised effectively and we haven't sort of really thought about what we're doing or stayed strong to what we need to get done, then we can get pulled off track very, very easily. So I think from there, it's kind of useful then to sort of look a little bit further at how we prioritise.
So I know I do, and I'm sure there's lots of people listening today. We often end up chasing our tails and everything needs to be done now. And so how do we really prioritise? How do we look at what we need to be doing and what can wait for that extra day?
Yeah. I think often where the confusion arises is it's this differentiation between what's important and urgent. And I think often a lot of things are driven by urgency and it's what needs to be done now or today. But how often do we step back and really evaluate, well, how important is this as well? And the important stuff is what drives results. If we make time to do it, that's going to start to deliver outcome towards your goals or your kind of key results. But I think it's looking at this relationship between the two that's critical in our thinking at times and helps us steer clearly through and navigate our path through all the demands and plans that we have. So just to put this into a little grid for you, the way we can start to look at this is in that top left box, we've got what's important and urgent. So it's going to contribute to your goals and it needs to be done now or today. And this is a kind of quadrant of immediacy. Now, typically the sort of stuff that's going to sort of slot in there is your routine work. Your daily routine work is always going to be important, urgent. You can't leave work without doing it because something's going to suffer and it's going to impact the bottom line. If you don't milk your cows, if you don't get the combine running, if you don't get the sprayer doing its job on a spray day, your results are going to suffer. The other thing that creeps in there is obviously other people's requests and demands of you, the unplanned or the unexpected, and then there's the crisis or the emergencies that creep in there that you find yourself dropping what you have to do to go and attend to those. The next quadrant to sort of consider is the important but less urgent. And this is the quadrant of effectiveness. So where do we get ahead? And this comes, a lot of planning happens in this quadrant here. So looking ahead longer term, so this week, this month, what do we need to work on? What do we need to get ordered up? What do we need to set up? What training do we need to plan? So getting these sort of things set up means that you get ahead, and it means that you don't get stuck in that upper left quadrant whereby everything's urgent and important and all you're doing is managing crisis and putting out fires. Leading on from there, then the top right quadrant is where the challenge lies, and often this is where we get caught up with what's urgent but less important in relation to what we're trying to achieve. And commonly this is where people may want things from you which for you is less important. It might be important for them, but it's going to take you away from the important stuff that you're trying to do. And this is where the challenge of what can I say no to, or what can I defer, or where do I make some space for some of this that may have a payback down the road for me. The reason this is a quadrant of delusion is if you get stuck in here and you become the yes person and doing everybody else's bidding, then you are going to start to become less and less effective. You'll be keeping everybody else happy for sure, but you certainly won't be keeping yourself happy, and you'll start to create more stress for yourself. The last box on the bottom right quadrant is it's not urgent or important. So often this is the nice to do stuff. You know, when I have time, when will I ever have time? I'd like to get that done. And there's often stuff that will sit in there and we may never get to. However, this could also be the quadrant where it's all the distracting stuff that comes into your life and, oh, that looks interesting, that looks good. For people who aren't using social media as a tool at work, often people get distracted with that and it takes their focus away from the stuff that they should be doing. There may also be, you could argue, some of your routine work that happens maybe monthly or quarterly actually sits down in there until you actually need to attend to it. So it moves back and forward from it's not important or urgent right now, but In a week's time, it will be, because I actually need to sort of tick that off and attend to that stock take, for example.
So I think we can see that many of us will be doing the jobs that probably fit more on the right than the left-hand side naturally, and that's the jobs that got us started, got us interested in doing the role, and we really enjoy them. Isn't it great to do what you like?
Well, it gives us all motivation for sure, and that's why if we don't really critically look at how urgent and important things are, we will be distracted and we will flow towards the jobs that we enjoy doing. So being tough with yourself at times is a key to actually sort of being critical and saying, well, actually, what is the best use of my time here, and what's actually going to deliver to my key results? And yeah, there's going to be jobs that you might have to chain yourself down to do, but the problem is if you don't, it hangs over you, and actually that saps your energy, because you know it's sitting on your shoulder and you keep putting it off, and it continually starts to sap your energy. So, you know, your ability to prioritize effectively will help you, you know, stay more on that left-hand side and address the kind of important stuff.
So, Will, we were talking earlier and you were saying that that's exactly the sort of scenario you were finding yourself in regularly. Do you want to talk us through that a bit?
Yeah, like for example, loading grain lorries in the yard. It's an important job, but should I really be spending all my time doing that, waiting for lorries? Because it can be quite a long and boring job. So now I've delegated that role, and I've got time now to have in the office or doing other jobs that are more productive and saving money elsewhere.
And you came up with a really nice phrase as well about the way you think about jobs now and how you prioritise.
What it was now.
About how much it'll mean in a week or.
Oh yeah, so basically I was saying if I'm worrying about something, I'll stop and think, well, I'll still be worrying about this next week, and if I'm not, then you stop worrying about it.
So we've got a question here for, do we have any tips for keeping attention span? I always try to prioritise but then lose interest.
Yeah, this is an interesting one, and I think given all the distractions that come our way and can sort of suddenly distract us, I think the challenge is, it's often about how do we kind of set aside time. One useful tip might be switch off all the things that are going to distract you. So often with our technology, we've got beeps and messages flashing up on our screens and things like that. If you switch all that off, then that's not getting in the way and taking you away from the job that you've set yourself to do. Set a time limit for yourself. How long am I going to set aside time to work on this? And this is the only thing I'm going to do. Really interestingly, how long can you actually sit there and do nothing else but the job that you need to do? And for those that procrastinate, it's actually quite tough just to sit there and do nothing. If you've said to yourself, I can't do anything else, I've got to do this job. It won't be long before you can launch into it. And maybe think about, how might I reward myself at the end of this? So if I get this bit done, what can I then do that I may give myself a little kind of reward for? And sometimes if you give a full 25 minutes of concentration to a task and then a little 5-minute break, you can catch up on other things that you need to look at, but you haven't been distracted for that 25 minutes. So that's a little technique called the Pomodoro technique. So it's basically about splitting up chunks of time that you give your full attention to. You have a 5-minute break, and then you go back if you need to that task, carry on for another 25 minutes, another 5-minute break. And after 4 times of that, then you can give yourself a 15-minute break.
That's brilliant. So I think everybody has that question is just suggested. Everybody does have good ideas, good intentions, but it's not always that easy when you're on farm and jobs are being thrown at you. And sometimes it's really difficult to see where your time's going. As we started this conversation, we were saying you get to 3 o'clock and you realise you've still got to start the day again. So how would you recommend that we do this? And I know we give time logs to people when they're doing the professional managers course. It's one of the first things we do for them, and it's one of the things that has the biggest impact. But we're already really busy, so why are we going to be completing more paperwork?
Yeah, and this is a challenge, is without seeking to add more paperwork. I think we have the reality of where our time goes versus how much time we spend on jobs is often very different. and actually keeping a little time log of where your time truly goes. And one of the things we often do in some of the groups is we get people to go away, and for 3 different days is to keep a little log of where the time is going. So the way that this works is it's important to use this right the way through maybe 3 different days. And every time you change job, is record how much time you spent on it. And that's all you need to do through the day. But at the end of the day, what you do need to do, and where the value comes from this, is to actually spend some time analysing it. And one of the things you can do is analyse how much of your time was spent on what you planned to do that day versus what was unplanned stuff that you got taken away from your work by. And also, we've just looked at priorities. So you could prioritise those quadrants, an A, B, or C, or a 1, 2, 3, whichever you like. Then you can also look at those activities and put your priorities against them and look at how much time you spent on some of your true priorities there as well. And that often gives you a real insight into how much time you truly spent on some tasks, and it gives you the chance to review, well, is there a better way to use my time? Is there a different way to use my time that's going to be more effective and help me move more towards my goals?
So we've just been asked, is this template available? And yes, we will make it available on the AHDB website. But as you can see, it's not actually that complicated. It can be something you draw up that has some meaning to you, but we will definitely make that available. So yeah, here's a little example of a time log that just kind of highlights where time went on a specific day for an individual, the time, the tasks. As you can see, there was some planned, unplanned events, and much time was spent, and they prioritised on a 1, 2, 3 basis. So it starts to give a quick insight into, you know, what were the priorities of some of those jobs and where the time went. And that's where the real insights start to come out of this. So it's great that we've got that insight, but the same as anything we record, it's only going to be useful if we actually do something with that information. What do you recommend we look at to make best use of that information? Yeah,
I think when you start to analyse your logs, often there's a number of things. Probably you might be surprised or you might think when you look at this, it's not uncommon. A lot of people spend 60% of their time on unplanned stuff. And the more you can reclaim that back, the more effective you're going to be, so that you are starting to control your time rather than being controlled by it. So that's one way to look at it. Another way might be looking at some of the jobs that you actually spent yourself doing, particularly the lower priority ones. Were you the right person to be doing that? Was that the best use of your time? And what's the kind of value of your time? You know, should you be doing that, or are you suddenly an overpaid tractor driver or milker or washer of plants? So those are some of the things to have a think about. Those are some ways that you can start to analyze your time log here. And I think the more that you're critical of what you're doing and take into account, yeah, you may be at risk of doing stuff that you enjoy doing, but is that the best use of your time? And is there somebody else that may be a better place to do that for you?
Well, the next couple of slides we're going to be looking at one of your time logs and what you did. But before we move on, is there anything else you want to add to that?
Just that doing the time log does actually need to plan a lot more, because you realise that the majority of your, or a big portion of your time is unplanned, and then you find yourself not fitting what you planned into the day. So you've got to allow for that unplanned stuff to come in. I found myself probably planning too much in a day and not being able to fit it all in.
And I think that's a great point you just made. I think often when you're scheduling your own time on a day-to-day basis, if you think about plan for achieving 60% of your time use for that day, that gives you the flexibility for the unplanned. It's inevitably going to come in, and that way it means if the unplanned doesn't arrive, then you can go back to maybe a list of jobs that you have and prioritize further from that. But if it does, then at least you don't feel like, well, I didn't get all this other stuff done that I really had to get done.
So Will, we know on your training course that you were asked to fill in a couple of time logs, which you duly did.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk through those plans and just let us know if there was anything that sort of surprised you or anything that came out?
So there's certain things that happen throughout the day that you've been booked in for, so like some generous breakfast meeting and stuff, I knew that was going to happen. So I got them then going and so forth. But then sometimes later on in the day, important things come up that are unplanned. That then scuppers your plan for the rest of the day. So basically, I think like you can see from these plans, they range from about 12 to 13 hours. But that's too much really. I should be planning a 13-hour day. So then I've also learned to delegate, because I found myself doing things that I probably didn't necessarily need to be doing myself. And just a quick phone call or just to tell someone, and then it would get done and free up my time. And also just to prioritise, like I said earlier, maybe not leave the office jobs till the end of the day. Do them maybe when I'm fresher at 10 o'clock in the morning, rather than when you're tired at the end of the day, because that's when a lot of the productiveness actually comes into play.
And did you find, looking at these, you obviously did a number of them, was there a sort of a typical figure of time that was being taken out of your day that you weren't intended on doing?
I'd say there was a good third of my time being taken out of the day, and that's, since doing this, it's reduced. And also I noticed, which I didn't really notice before, but I wasn't having any lunch. So from an energy, from what we were saying earlier, energy and not eating is not healthy, health and safety point of view as well. So I took that away from this as well, which has been invaluable.
That's brilliant. Anything to add, Alistair?
Yeah, I think it's a great point you just brought up there, Will. In this day and age, how many people actually stop and take a proper break for lunch, albeit half an hour? Or because I think it's that mental refreshment that comes when you can switch off from what you're doing and actually give yourself the permission to take a rest and to stop everything that's buzzing around and just calm everything down a bit. And that recharge, I think, is really important. So often nowadays, what do we see? People are eating, they're scrolling through their phones, and they're multitasking and trying to do two things at once. And yeah, it's okay to stop for a break. But I think we've got caught up with this 24/7 life to a degree that actually we forget. There are times that we can, increase our kind of energy and our satisfaction and our enjoyment just by focusing on something or taking some time out.
But I think in fairness as well, Will, 30% of the day is a big chunk. It's actually quite a low figure to what we see when a lot of people complete this, and it would be closer to 40–50% is what is a typical.
30% of a 12-hour day, 4 hours of your day. So,
exactly, yeah. It's a long time.
It's a long time to be unplanned for as well. So.
Okay, so there's some really good information, Alistair. How are we going to put this together so that we can really have a positive impact on ourselves, our own well-being, and the job itself?
Yeah. Okay, I think, and this links back into some of the mental energy that we started with. I think, and also one of the previous questions that we just answered about staying focused maybe on a priority. And I think, again, the challenge is how do we block out time so that we can work on one job? There's been enough research done. Multitasking, whoever you are, is less effective and efficient in the long run. Every time you get distracted by something, you lose efficiency immediately because you switch from one task and then back to another, and you have to pick yourself back up from where you left off. And this ability to actually protect time and create time for yourself to do certain things can be quite critical. And it links to this concept of deep work. If you can shut out all the distractions and really get focused on something, and there will be some jobs for some of you that if you don't protect that time and get focused on it, it keeps dragging out, and you never get it accomplished, or then you get into that important and urgent box, and then suddenly the pressure's really on. So I think we're all very good at protecting time for other people and making appointments to them, but when did you last make an appointment to yourself and say, you know what, this is my time, and I'm going to create time that I'm not going to be disturbed, and I'm going to take myself away, and I'm going to just really give my full attention to this particular job. So that's kind of one way to look at managing your mental energy and giving yourself the opportunity to do good quality work and not have that distraction. And I think, you know, the attention span of people today has shortened more and more as a result of technology. And this is one way that we can go about trying to reclaim that back, because this is a powerful part of you being effective.
I think one of the common bits of feedback we get back is when people do make themselves unavailable, especially if they've got other people, they're responsible for other people, then actually they go away and they work it out themselves and they empower themselves and they become a lot more self-reliant, which again releases even more time. Is that something you found as well, Will?
Yeah, especially with delegation, sort of passing on the responsibility, and then that improves training as well, which is another thing entirely. But yeah, normally they'll pick up the phone and ask this, but actually now they just do it off their own back, because you let them have that freedom, and they're better off for it, and I'm better off for it. So.
Yeah, and then you've not got all that distraction of what about this, Will?
A lot less phone calls in the day as well.
Yeah.
And have you changed a bit? Are you now blocking out time to do specific things?
Yeah, so like I said, I'll do office time in the middle of the day, or try to, when there's no one else around, no distractions. But I also think you've got to be in the right frame of mind as well, because otherwise you can sit twiddling your thumbs not doing something. But if you're in the right frame of mind, you can actually get a lot done in quite a short amount of time, especially with like assignments and just get spray plans and stuff. They're important jobs that need doing, but you need to be in the right frame.
So we've got a question from the audience. We've just talked about stopping those distractions. How do we actually encourage our staff and other people not to distract us? How do we set that in motion?
This is a tough one, and I think probably for a lot of staff in the workplace, trying to manage, most people are carrying phones with them, and the risk is that things are going to go off Bing, and they're going to be receiving messages coming through. And in some cases, if people are continually distracted, some businesses have had to bring in some kind of policy to kind of manage that, which you want to put trust in people and you want to sort of allow them to manage things, but sometimes it can even be a health and safety risk that you kind of have to manage. But I think planning with your staff, taking some time with them to kind of be clear about, here's what needs to be achieved today, here's how our success is going to be measured today, your success is going to be measured today. Let's agree on how long this should take to get done. So setting deadlines for stuff is a kind of helpful way to kind of keep people focused on what needs to be done. And, you know, if phones or other things are creating too much distraction, then I think it's maybe having a sit-down conversation and making people aware of what are the consequences of this if this continues, and how can we agree to manage this.
That's brilliant. So I think we're all aware life is changing in the way people view how they work and when they want to work, and we see people coming forward for the staff management training. A lot of them are driven by seeking a better work-life balance and trying to achieve that through time management. We can also see current labour issues. People are no longer willing to work every hour. We have many farmers in the industry that boast about the number of hours they've worked. It's as if it's a badge of honour to do that 80 hours overtime. I think, but we need to say, are they any better at farming? Are they really moving forward? And I think I would say, is it a time as an industry we started looking at minimal overtime as a benchmark as opposed to maximum hours? Working out can be a full-on job. We all know it's seasonal, and there is those times where we are going to work 14-hour days. But just because we've always done something a specific way doesn't mean we should continue to do it. And we see many businesses testing different ways of working. And often that works best when they're looking at the employee and the employee in mind. Alice, what are your thoughts on how we can achieve this?
Yeah, I think this is a continual challenge for all of us, and how do we get that work-life balance? And I think you know, there are some choices that we can make, and probably the most important thing that would help all of us is about looking further ahead. In the longer term. So whether you want to look ahead a year, a couple of years, 5 years, and For some people, from a career point of view, where do you see yourself? Where do you want to take your career? What do you want to achieve? It's also being clear about what does work want from you? What are the goals, the targets, the yields, the things that you need to sort of deliver against, whether you're part of a team or you're running the business yourself. And what about outside of work? Being clear about what do you want to make time for? What's important for you? We spend a lot of time working, but at the end of the day, we have to make some choices as to, what deserves our time, from either maybe a family perspective or, from some of our social side, or what renewal do we need in our lives that helps us come back to work refreshed, recharged, and with a kind of zest to kind of carry on. And I think that longer term planning is really important. And let's be honest, I've not heard anybody get to the end of their working career and turn around and go, hey, you know what? I never spent enough time at work. It's more like I may have had some regrets that maybe I didn't spend enough time pursuing some other things that I wanted to do. And whilst I know farming is as much a way of a life as career, and that's why I got into it, we still have to sort of create some time so that we can recharge. And all work and no play, as they say, makes Jack a dull boy. And it's where do we kind of get the balance for that and prioritize our time? So I think those kind of things can be helpful to really give us a sharp focus on what's important, and that helps us then prioritize our time at work and outside of work more effectively.
We've got a really interesting question, Alistair. How do we strike a work-life balance as a one-man band? There's going to be lots of people out there that haven't got the luxury of delegating, like Will's been talking about this evening. So how do they go about really getting that balance right?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's such a challenge. And some thoughts maybe around, are there some things that you can get other people to do on your behalf? Sometimes it's what can you farm out to others, or that you can pay other people to come and do for you, that then takes the pressure off you. So although you can't delegate jobs to people because they're not directly employed by you, you can still pay people to potentially maybe come and do some types of jobs for you. And I think by looking clearly at what's the best use of your time, where can you play to your strengths, who has got some skills that can do the job better than I can, and maybe it's worth paying for that service or that input from somebody else because they might be quicker, faster, more efficient at that job. It frees you up to do the things that you're good at and you can work on. And I appreciate the challenge for those that work on their own and are one-man bands. It's then about how do you create time off to actually get away from your business. And that's often the toughest thing, and often that comes back down to planning sometimes. Can you plan ahead and block out some time to say, is this a time that I can break out, and whether I can get away for a couple of days or a week or whatever, this is important stuff to do. Or who can I rely on, or that might come in and take care of some things in my absence, and building relationships that may be able to support you in that way.
I think using the time log as well is a really useful tool, because I know we said it earlier, but you can actually analyse your day, and maybe you're not using the best use of your time, or you can cut some things out. They can be done another time. So that's making the best use of your time on your own.
And I think, I totally agree with you, Alistair, but I can see some people sat there saying, but I can't afford a contractor. I can't afford to pay someone to come in. And I think we're notorious as an industry of not valuing our own time.
Indeed.
And I think if we spent a bit of time understanding exactly how much it costs us to do a job, actually those contractors become very valuable. Yeah, and I think the best thing you can do is put a price on your time and say, if this is the value of my time, am I the best person to be doing this, or how does that equate to paying somebody else to come and do something on my behalf? And I think it's worth asking the question, and it's worth looking at who's around you and who might be able to do some stuff for you. And I think, to reiterate as well, a value on your own personal time and health and energy, and taking that time out. It can be more valuable than carrying on and on and on. Yeah. So we've got another question. Someone makes a comment that we benchmark inputs and physical results. Is there a sensible scope for benchmarking time use or ergonomics, or are we too different to make this valuable?
I think there is, and the way you can start benchmarking that is maybe going back to doing a little time log. That gives you your own benchmark straight away about where your time's going. One of the things that I've sometimes recommended people to do is, having done that exercise, analysed it, changed how you work, is revisit that, and in the future do another little time log and see what's changed, and you can actually measure what you've done differently. The ergonomics is a good one, and this is our relationship to the environment that we work in, where we physically move and operate, and also the environment that we operate within. So I think having a look at that very much links to the routine work that we do. And when you look at the repeatable work that you do day in, day out, that's a great place to look at how can I streamline my time use on that? How can I do that more efficiently so that I end up with less backache or the risk of repetitive strain injury? How can I set that job up to be more comfortable? And I think you can actually start to analyze and measure the way that a job is done, and then you can sort of look at the ergonomics that are involved in that, and then again you can go back and review the new way of doing the job that you have designed and remeasure that. So yeah, you can definitely benchmark.
Okay, we've got another good idea in from Emma. Can we start a supportive team doing farm swaps? A change is as good as a rest. Now, we know on multi-site farms that works really well, where people go, or even where you've got units within the business. So, for example, the pork industry, getting people to do different elements really can reinvigorate them and motivate them.
Yeah.
But have you ever seen any models where separate farms have been sharing labour?
Yes, and I think what's happened in recent, well, I mean, going back 15 years, what started to change was farming businesses under cost pressures started to buy machinery together, rather than every farm having their own combine. Well, who are we going to join up with and spread that cost? And I think what's extended from there is businesses not only sharing machinery, but sharing labour. And I think if that isn't happening so far for you, then maybe it's worth investigating or thinking about who's around me and where can we scratch each other's backs on this, and how might that kind of work to our benefit and their benefit. And if we want to get some time out, maybe they can look after some things on our behalf, and we can do the same for them, vice versa. So I think that's one way that you can start to look at this. So I think being creative here in the way that you start to look at the things that are blocking your opportunities to move forward. You know, sometimes this is where you can open up some new ways and ideas, and that's a great question that has come up there.
The other question we've got in there is from Ross. Any tips on how to get away from thriving on being busy? So we know there's lots of farmers out there that really don't like twiddling their thumbs when they get the opportunity. How are they going to stop working and take some rest time? Yeah,
I think you need to tap into, you know, outside of work, what do you really enjoy doing? And some people like adrenaline sport. Some people like to just go off and visit and travel. Some people like a bit of culture. Whatever kind of flicks your switch, I think it's really important. And that comes back to this things that you want to kind of achieve personally. For some people, it's about, you know, where can I make more time for family stuff? Because for those of you with kids, they grow up very quickly, and it's suddenly too late when you look back and think, I never spent enough time with my kids. So it's about being clear about what's important for you. And some people do like to be occupied all the time, but how can you occupy your time outside of work and carve out some time to go and be busy elsewhere? And I think that's one way to kind of maybe think about that.
Okay, is there any more questions out there for anybody before we wrap this up? Will, have you got anything else to add in?
Just about the work-life balance, really. On the family farm at home, we're trying to work less weekends and less really necessary, which helps with the staff motivation, and everyone starts fresh on a Monday. And because we're making better use of our time, we're actually probably getting more done. So, but obviously we have to work weekends when we have to, but it takes the pressure off a bit and everyone's a bit more relaxed.
Yeah.
So we've just got one in there, a question in now. If we're leaving things until tomorrow, we're cramming in as much as we can into the day after today. Is there value in trying to set a sensible working day so that you can switch off? So should we be really telling ourselves it's 5 o'clock we're finishing or another time?
I think it is important, and I think it's about setting boundaries. I think we are also available now because of technology, and at some point, where do you say, you know, I'm done, and I'm going to take some time out to relax or rest or go and do something different, or by going off and taking you away. And often this is the other challenge, is sometimes what you've got to do is take yourself out of the business and get away from it, particularly when you live on site, because there will always be distractions and there will always be things that you can be doing. And sometimes just getting away from the business, even if it's for an evening or half a day or something, that creates space and time to sort of get away from all the things that are coming at you in terms of your workload. So yeah, I think it's important. If you're going to manage your energy and to get that balance right, that's critical.
So we've got a really good tip from Brian. The best way to be productive is stay hydrated. I think we would all agree with that one. And again, it goes back to we're looking after our health and we're going to be more productive at work. We've got an age-old one coming from Stephen that I know there's a lot of people it will resonate with. How would you cope with the older family members who do not approve of not giving 100% to the farm, particularly when they own the farm and have never taken holidays?
I'd just say, like, try it and you'll be amazed at what you get out of it, and you see a change in productivity. And that's the proof is in the pudding, really.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, it's a bit like the difference between, are you a marathon runner, and that's what, you know, never taking holiday and being there all the time is. You end up getting to a point where you just got to keep pacing yourself to keep going. If you're a sprinter, you're going to push hard, you're going to give it your maximum. And I don't believe when people don't take time off, they can give it 100%. And, you know, when you go back to that kind of management of your physical energy. So, you know, by all means, give it your all, but you need some rest and recuperation to come back and give it your all again. And I think that's where we can often deliver much more effectiveness when you look at those kind of 4 aspects of your energy.
I think it's related to perception as well, isn't it? So not giving 100% to the farm by knocking off in early evening time is not you not giving 100% if you've worked solid for that day and you've done a good 8 hours and have actually produced something for the business. So I think it's very easy to get drawn into doing everyday tasks and working in the business and not on the business, and actually that doesn't help anyone or drive a business forward.
And I think the other thing you really have to sort of challenge and be quite clear about is what's been described here is if people never take breaks and they're working all the time, and I appreciate with older family members, you know, that's a habit and something that they choose to do, but that's being a workaholic. And there are plenty of examples out there of people who, you know, became workaholics for one reason or another, and the danger is it starts destroying relationships, and that can spiral. And there's a real risk there if somebody doesn't start setting the example and taking a stance on it. It sets an example to other people around you that this is what's expected, and staff then feel that well, I can't take time off because I'm expected to come in and do this and this. And I think setting the example is really important to your staff as well as your family.
I think a good point as well is to make use of those wet days and stuff when things aren't, when there isn't a lot on, make the most of that time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we've got one last question to finish off, and then we'll just wrap up the session. Sounds like there's lots of good advice out there. I tend to have a manager or colleague who tells me off for poor time management. Would it be good advice to have a mentor or peer to help keep you on track?
I think, yeah, the challenge is, I think, again, is being aware of, so what is it that's having an impact on your time use? And if management of time is impacting on your effectiveness, then I think the question is where might you kind of change that? if it helps to have someone else, it could, you know, keep you on track a bit. But I think ultimately that's a short-term thing. Ultimately, we all have to take responsibility for being clear about what we need to do, where we're going to focus our energy and our effort, and what we need to deliver on. And if all of that is clear, then it's what you deliver at the end of the day. It's not about how much time you spend at work.
And I think we've seen lots of people as they go through the courses that we're doing using whiteboards and just doing that planning that Will's talked about as well. So there is lots of apps and tools out there that you can download to help you, but it's whatever really works for you and the people that you're working with. So on that note, I'm going to bring this session to a close. The one last slide we've got for you is we've been referring to training throughout the evening. And the main course that we've been talking about is the Professional Manager Development Scheme. It's something that we run on an annual basis. We've currently got a scheme which Will is participating in, and applications are now open for the next course. So you have until the 24th of June to submit an application, tell us why you would benefit from the course. We then hold interviews instant only on the 10th of July, and we're looking to start the course in September. So if any of this has been useful to you and you think you could learn more, then please do get in touch and look for an application form. But in the meantime, thank you very much, Alistair. Thank you, Will.
Thank you.
And good luck, everybody, managing your time.
Indeed.